Welcome back to Dist Media, a startup story. My name is Ben Olmos, founder and CEO of Dist Media. This is a podcast where I take you along my journey of starting Dist Media from the ground up. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. I'm happy you found us, and hopefully you'll like what you hear. For those of you coming back, I'm glad that we piqued your interest enough for you to return, and I hope that you enjoy this next step in our journey. This show is all about documenting Dist Media's startup journey and keeping you in the loop every step of the way. I'll be keeping you up to date on meetings, phone calls, emails, and all the things that I need to do to get this business up and running. So with that, let's pick up where we left off last time. All right, everybody, welcome back to Dist Media, a startup story. I am your host, as always, Ben Olmos, and again, as always, joining me, Alan Landry. Alan, how are you?
I am doing just fine, Ben. It's been kind of a crazy week for us too, so glad to be here. Good to see you again. Look forward to catching up and finding out how Dist Media is doing in episode number 9.
Yeah, and this is the official number 9, and I'll give a little backstory. Like this should have been episode 10. What happened is, and again, I'm glad we're not sponsored because I'm about to do some trash talking about this new platform we're using, but I started using a software called Squadcast, and I have to say, for the most part, I have no complaints, except that we had some weird technical issues with our episode 8, and what ended up happening was about 3 minutes of you ended up making it to the recording, and then it just dropped everything, and it was one-sided of the conversation. So we ended up having to scrap that one. So there's a little bit of a lag in between, but I don't think we missed out on much. So
it would have been an interesting monologue, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I was sitting there editing it, and I'm like, this really is just a lot of me talking. And I started scrolling through, and I'm like, where's Alan? I don't see any of it. So
yeah, if you scroll and I'm not there, we have technical issues.
Yeah,
it's clear.
But it was really weird. But we're good now. We're back in action.
I appreciate you sharing that. And we talked before about this. The key here is that because this is a startup story, things like that happen. And so you lost some good content, but you just pivot and you move out on it,
Yeah. It's unfortunate that, the point of doing this podcast is to kind of preserve the story as we're going along. So it does kind of suck when a portion of that doesn't happen. But in reality, too, we've also had some challenges getting episodes out on a regular basis. And a lot of that, and we've talked about this before, there's things that I have on my radar that I have to commit to, and I can't not do those things. I can't prioritize this ahead of that. So, and that's kind of the story of anybody who has a side gig or a side hustle or something that you're doing, is that you got to remember where your priorities are, because if not, if you overinvest in things that are not really your bread and butter, you're putting at risk your bread and butter. So I think it's just really important to have that perspective. Alan, I just wonder, from given your military background, on the battlefield, let's say, there are probably opportunities, things that you would like to do versus things you have to do. One of the things you've mentioned before is the military is very good about education. And it's been my experience as a faculty member, we always get military students in our classes. What do they teach you in the military about opportunity and opportunity cost?
It is a fascinating question. I'm not sure there's a single or simple answer around it. I think the most important thing that I learned from some of the best schools that the Army has to offer is, instead of the caricature that a lot of people have of the Army, is they teach you what to think. Well, that's baloney. It's not true. The schools I went to taught me how to think, so that regardless of the situation that you're put in, and as we talked before about having a living, thinking, breathing enemy, a combatant out there, you got to be able to spin. You got to be able to pivot on the fly. And we talked about the importance of strategically planning, branches, and sequels. All these are parts and pieces of being prepared to take advantage of the opportunity when it hits you. And so one of the things that I've appreciated is that luck is the intersection of preparation with opportunity. The more prepared you are, the luckier you're going to get. So, those are the key things. And there's one more thing that's really important that I saw missing in industry a bit. As in the military, commanders are surrounded by staffs. And the importance of those staffs is to help the commanders see the things that are otherwise not visible to that commander. And so every area, whether it's personnel or logistics or operations or supply, you could have the best plan in the world, but if you don't talk to the logistician and listen to their input, and that's what's key, involve them all in the planning if they're stakeholders, listen to them, consolidate their input, and then make the best decision to go forward. And at every step of the way, listen to your staff. You're the decision maker. They're making recommendations. And you see that play out in our relationship. I'm a board member. You own the company. You're the CEO. And my responsibility as a board member is to advise and assist. I'm not the decision maker. So you're seeing that play out, and hopefully that's servicing you the way you need to be served.
Yeah, I think that is one of those things that is really kind of interesting. I tend to be the person who loves to collaborate. And one of my favorite sayings is everybody has a voice, but I have the final say. And I have that approach when I'm the one who's in charge and is ultimately going to be accountable for whatever decisions get made. I want everybody to have a voice, but at the same time, I need to be the person that kind of moves and shapes this in the direction that I ultimately intended it to be. And to that point, I've actually made some good traction this week along.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. I want to hear about that.
Yeah, along those lines. So one of the things that I have always envisioned Dist Media and our first couple products here, one of which is this podcast, the other is the Daily Pitch, our business news and insights website, is I have had the luxury and opportunity of meeting a lot of people in my career and building my career alongside a lot of people just as well. And it's interesting because I've really got two careers that I've had for well over 15 years. One is in the consumer products goods industry, which has always been my bread and butter. And it's an industry I really love. It's about products, it's about branding and marketing and sales and data and insights and psychology and all kinds of wonderful stuff that I love about that industry. And I've been doing that for 30 years. And on the flip side, about halfway through that career, I started teaching in higher education. And I've been doing that for 17 years now. And it's kind of neat because I've gotten this opportunity to learn and get to know people with really different focuses. If I only stuck to people in my industry, I would know a lot of great salespeople and branding people and marketing people, finance people, all those roles that it takes to run a business. But then getting the opportunity to work in academia, I got to connect with people who work in different industries than my own. So even though I knew and connected with all these people, you don't always meet people outside of your industry or even suppliers that feed your industry, right? So sure, you come along tech people, but you don't meet, for example, one of our board members, Keith Watts, is in pharmaceuticals. I don't really have a lot of exposure to pharmaceuticals, and I never would have if I wasn't teaching. And so the cool thing about teaching is you get to meet people from a lot of different backgrounds and industries. And the whole reason that I have wanted to put something like Dist Media together is a lot of people that I've met, whether they are career executives, entrepreneurs, people in academia, they all have a desire to share the wisdom that they've acquired over their duration in their careers. And Dist Media, Daily Pitch, this podcast gives people a platform to share what they know. And this is kind of my pitch to the people who I've worked with throughout my career is, come to Dist Media Land, share your knowledge and your wisdom, because I have one very practical principle that I learned at Coca-Cola, which is we will help, if you do business with us, we're going to help you grow your business. And I say that because I'm looking for people who are contributors. Now I've got a decent amount of content on the site, and I'm now in a position where I'm saying I could use more content from more diverse people, different backgrounds, and I have something to show them. I have the website, and I want them, take a look, show me, not really show me, but I would be interested in having you share content, and in return, I will promote the hell out of what you've got going on, whether it's a book or your consulting or your training or, whatever it is. Like, I want us to be an information vehicle for people looking for information, but I also want us to be a promotional vehicle for those people who are, kind enough to contribute some of their wisdom to our website. And so this week I made a couple advancements on that. There's a contributor that I spoke with yesterday, somebody I worked with in my career. Her name is Lori Pine. You can find Lori at loripine.com. She is an executive consultant and coach that kind of helps people in executive levels work through different challenges that they might be having. And Lori is awesome, not just when I was working with her, but even afterwards, just through her career. So she's going to be contributing, and we hope to have her on the podcast to kind of share some of the things that she is going to be contributing and some of the work that she does. And she's got a lot of really good, interesting stories. And she's the kind of person that was funny in our conversation. She was saying, when she started her company, she focused on female executives in leadership. And, she has her own stories about kind of doing it all as a woman of industry. And she felt like she could lend a helping hand to many people who were in similar situations that she found herself in. And what has surprised her is that there's a significant portion of her business that are male executives, looking for the same kind of support that she provides. So she's got a lot of really good stories, a lot of really good thoughts around, leadership. And so she's going to be fun to get some of her content on the site. And then I had another conversation this week with a contact of mine, a guy by the name of Sam Doshi. And Sam he reached out to me because there was something new that he started that I thought was kind of neat, which is a platform where people can volunteer their time to help other people who need some coaching and advice. And, right now it's not really a business per se, but, if you're a person who is interested in donating their time, or, certainly there are options if you want to say, hey, I'll donate some time, but I'll also charge for those who are interested. He's got a really broad network of people. He's looking for people to kind of join that platform, and it's just getting ready to launch. And he thought of me and he said, I think you'd be great as a person for this. And so I committed to donate some of my time to Sam in exchange for him donating some of his wisdom to our site. So yeah, it's a little bit of
you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours.
Yeah.
That's right.
Sam has got a really robust network, and so I'm hoping that he can contribute to us. I will certainly contribute to the things that he's doing, and we'll kind of build it from there. And then Keith also gave us some insight on somebody who he knows that is into social media and knows how to kind of grow audiences and things like that. So yeah, it's kind of neat to get traction and see people looking at this thing and saying, hey, that's really cool. Like I see there's usefulness in that. The TikTok channel continues to grow. Every day we are adding subscribers to it. So that is awesome. And we're generating likes. The YouTube channel still, we quickly got 500 views and it was rocking and rolling. And then it just it cratered. It stopped. Like all of a sudden, like, I don't know, somebody, the YouTube algorithm gods just did not like what we were doing and
Wow.
decided to stop serving us up to anybody. So
Put Disney in there again, did you?
I did not put anything about Disney.
But go ahead with the other stuff here. So one of the questions I was going to ask you is, you sent out a really important and very valuable insight to the board to help us understand the progress, and you listed success factors over the past 30 days. What a powerful and encouraging tool that helped your board have visibility over the things that only you had visibility. Can you talk a little bit about that and how often you plan on doing something like that, and how often you track it? And within that, where are the areas that you're seeing the greatest success?
Yeah, so let me work on pulling that up. But yeah, one of the things that I like to try and do, and I think it's important when you're doing any of these things, is to kind of keep people looped in. Like, communication is really important, making sure that people know how things are going. As a matter of fact, and I wrote an article about this that I put out on our website, you have what I call the 4 core in business, which is when you talk about communication, parallel to communication is trust, right? So trust and communication are two things that are kind of like chicken and the egg. It is not really known what comes first. In order to build trust, you have to have communication. In order to feel comfortable with communication, you have to build trust. So those two things are always present, and you have to be bold enough to take risks to offer trust to build communication. So anyway, trust, communication, processes and routines are the other two, but I'm going to focus on trust and communication. So one of the things I think that's important is to kind of let people know, like, how it's going. Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? Or whatnot? And so I had given a 30-day update where we had some really good growth. So active users were up 21%, new users were up 30%, returning users were up 41%, sessions were up 34%, organic social reach was up 80%, active users over the past 7 days was up 56%, engagement, people who are engaging with our content, up 54%, page views up 70%, user engagement up 62%. And all of that, the thing I love about percentages is they get you really excited. But let's just remember that if percentages are real easy to manipulate with lower numbers. So when you're starting from nothing, percentages can look really good. But, I'll take the wins where I can get them. And I think that it means that we're moving in the right direction. And it shows that people are responding to what we're doing. And some of our marketing strategies are working, and some of the content strategies are working, and the SEO optimization is working. So it's good. Now it's just being continuous and predictable and constantly sharing that message out about what we're doing and how we're doing it and all of that stuff. Like, audiences take time to build. And that's one of those things that I continue to hammer on about. Don't sit there and watch YouTube if you've got no social media reach and you've got no connections, really. And don't get lured in by these people who are like, hey, pay me some money. I'll take a class. I'll show you how to do it. I can show you everything they're showing you, but they already have a following. And one thing that you should always ask yourself, like, there's people who are like, hey, all you got to do is take this product and social media market it, and you can make a mint. Well, why on earth would you be focused on selling classes if you've got it, something that works, work on that, like build a good product and you put it out there. Why are you like, Coca-Cola isn't coming up with classes on how to make soda. Like, they're just worried about selling soda. So like, focus on your product and build your own thing. Don't go out there and worry about taking a class on it.
I want to stay on this communications and trust piece for just a minute,
Yeah.
if you allow me. So, I told you that in my view, it's really important. And in one of the previous podcasts, you mentioned something I'd never heard before, and it was called motivational intelligence.
Yeah.
Now, here's how I play back what happened as a result of you publishing this to your board. So we've talked about ways. How do you keep a board engaged, and how do how do you get them involved in the work that you're doing, because they all got day jobs and all that kind of stuff too. And somewhere in this business, so I was struck by the fact that by you sharing that, you got more responses from board members within 24 hours than you have from any other single communication that I had seen. And so, right in between where I drew this picture of communications and trust, there's this thing about motivational intelligence that's spinning around in there. And you feed that when you share that communication and you build trust.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? I think everybody likes to hitch their wagon to a winning team. You don't see many Bulls fans anymore, but they're all Golden State Warrior fans now.
They're going to get all that hate mail.
but if you were back in the 90s, early 2000s, like everybody was a Bulls fan, right?
All right.
Because people like a winning team. I think that's the important thing about what we're doing with the podcast, is to kind of share the fact that, like, there's no such thing as an overnight success, and building a winning team means that you're also, for a lot of times, not a winning team. And you got to figure out what you're doing wrong and retool and try things differently. And we don't want to be the Cleveland Browns, as we're I'm just annihilating anybody who cares about us in the Midwest.
We just lost 1,000 viewers right there. No, but you're so right on this. It's this whole business about staying the course. We've talked about this instant gratification mentality, and again, that's also tied to this motivational intelligence. If the first obstacle you hit, you run away. You're not going to succeed at anything.
Well, right. And it's to that point. Yeah, I kind of said what I did about the Browns, but I will tell you what, they have a fan base, and those people are loyal, and they're not going anywhere. And it is enough of a fan base to keep the operation going. And so, you know what? At the end of the day, they've got a community, and it's strong, and it works, and they love it. So why they don't care whether they're the Patriots. They've got what they got, and they love what they've got. And I think that's an important takeaway. Like, I'm not trying to be the Wall Street Journal, and I'm never going to be. But what I do want to do is create a community of really thoughtful people who want to learn about business and get insights from really interesting, intriguing people, and kind of join the club, like be a part of what we're doing. And, we're just looking to sustain, to keep going.
And one of the things I love about the work that you're about, that, and one of the reasons I joined it, is you're about these enduring insights that we talk, and we'll do a recap again today. And so you said it last time, 5 years from now, we want this stuff to not turn into vapor. We still want it to be useful information. So you're building a report of enduring insights that should be able to help people 5, 10, 15 years from now.
Yeah. And it's funny because one of the things I told my friend Lori is, I said, right now I am out on the prowl looking for, boy, it sounds really creepy, doesn't it? But right now I'm out there looking for wise, insightful people who want to contribute. And we've talked about this before. I'm a really bootstrapped organization. And I said, I can't pay for a lot of content, but what I can give you is exposure and promotion, and hopefully people from an audience you haven't reached yet. And when she agreed, she's like, there is value in that. So, and I'm always very upfront about people to let them know kind of like what they're stepping into. Like, we're not a hugely, well, we are not at all a revenue generating organization yet. So my whole thing, this is part of the trust and communication part, is, you got to be honest with people. And I'm honest with our audience. I'm like, yeah, like, our percentages are great, but our numbers still aren't. Like, the overall numbers for this website have yet to compete with even some of the lower tier stuff right now. So, but this is how you build an audience, right? You go out there and you tell people what you're doing, and you focus on building a quality product, and you hope that all of that energy and effort is going to lead to recognition, and then people are going to respond to it.
How many businesses have you seen just in your lifetime that were fluff, that were full of words and language and didn't meet? They weren't honest. They weren't talking about the sausage factory. They weren't laying out the facts and being authentic about it. And they might even get investors involved in it, but they die. And when they die, they lose their credibility and reputation and everything else. So I'm happy to be in the sausage factory with you.
So did you say bosses? Or did you say bosses or businesses?
Businesses.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I could.
Yeah,
I could have named off some people I used to work for that would have fit that characterization very well.
Which one do you want to talk about, Ben?
Let's keep it nice.
Let's keep it to businesses, But there's just this whole thing about if you're lying about your results and you're not being honest and authentic about it, eventually you're going to get found out, and when you do, the fall is going to be hard.
Yeah, so you and I talked about this before. That really horrible mantra that people will sometimes say, which is "fake it till you make it." And when you come across, I know we talked about businesses, but people can be the same way. When you come across people that are just blowing a bunch of hot air, and your words sound really polished, and you're just an echo chamber of a bunch of like whatever inspires you for the day, you're not really being a thought leader. You're not coming up with your unique individual perspective on what works and why it works. I remember one time I went to this event. It was a conference that I'd gone to. And, as conferences are, especially when you go kind of solo and you're kind of networking, and it comes lunchtime and you sit down to a table of strangers. And there was this guy who sat down at our table, very talkative, very nice, very engaging. And he really liked to sound insightful. And
I know where this one's going.
And it was so funny because he sits down and we're talking about people and managers and business and things like that. And he starts articulating very well this book that I had read, and kind of positioning it as if he's the one coming up with these insights, right? And he goes, the mind is like an elephant and a rider, where the elephant has its own instincts and wants to go its own direction, and the rider is there to kind of, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, dude, I read that book. Like that there's a book called The Happiness Hypothesis. And it talks, it's all built around this aspect of the elephant and the rider. But the guy was talking about it as if he was the one who, this is his original thought. And that is one of the things when I've taught over 75 different business classes. I can't tell you the number of textbooks that I've used as material for my class. I can cite textbook authors, and you just know when you're talking to someone whether or not this is original thought or if it's just recycled stuff that is taught in B school.
Well, the scary part, I guess the sad part, is people think they're going to get away with that. And when you're a balloon like that, just full of hot air, it just takes one little pinprick. You shrivel up to nothing, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because one of the things I try to be very honest about too is like whenever like the four core that I have boiled business down into, I'm not the first one to come up with that. The Speed of Trust. Stephen Covey wrote a great book, Speed of Trust.
Yes.
And he talks about all of these trust principles and why trust is important to business. And communication, I can't tell you the number of books that have been written on communication and the importance of communication and adapting your style to the audience and learning how to communicate with others. I was going to say Getting Things Done, wrong book. Roger Fisher, who was a great Harvard University negotiator, consulted with leaders and secretaries of state on negotiation tactics. I learned a lot from Roger Fisher's writings on communication and how the value of that is. Processes and routines, that's all Six Sigma and project management. And,
Yes, yes.
if you're into the project management book of knowledge, or the PMBOK as they call it, or you've studied at all Six Sigma and process redesign and monitoring and enhancement, any of that stuff, it all comes from those things. I didn't come up with it. I just came up with a way of putting all of these concepts into one thing that says, here's how they all connect. So, but I certainly don't, try and say like, this is my original thinking. That it's one of those things when you work on a PhD, your chair makes sure that you realize you know nothing.
But you brushed over it too quickly, and I want to highlight something that we talked a little bit about last time. You are leveraging your insights, you're bridging between your day-to-day work life and what you learn from this media and what you learn from this media back into your day-to-day life. And there is genius in the application of those resources and lessons learned rather than the narrow application. So I think that's a core lesson for people. Gather your resources, give credit where credit's due, combine them in unique and useful ways, and then apply them across your businesses or your relationships or everything else.
100%. There are no self-made people. Everybody needs a team of sponsors, of promoters, of people who feed you good insights, good information. They're willing to lend a hand, help you out. I don't know. I abandoned this notion many years ago that like it's all up to me, or I've got to be the one that does it. Like you need a team of people who want to see you do well for your sake. And if you don't have that, go find it, because if you surround yourself with a bunch of people who are just constantly trying to outdo you, one up you, show you how better they are than you are, like just get away from that. Like surround yourself with people who want to see you do well, and you will do well.
Well, it's right back to the question you asked me early on about how the military works this. And by creating an organic team, so the commander's got the command sergeant major and your whole staff there, and you got one mission, and you got a whole team that are focused on the success, not of you, not just of them and their careers, not of your career, but of the mission itself. And when you can create, and it doesn't happen that often, but when you can create a high performing team, you know it. You don't want to let that bad boy go.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And the hard part is like you kind of said it. If you can create it. And I think any good leader, strategist, manager, like they obsess about that thing, the if, because you're constantly looking for the how. Like you have that if, and it's like, okay, well, how do you do it? And the only way you're going to find out is being bold enough to take the risk and start trying it, and being humble enough to know when you are having trouble and you need help, and being bold enough to ask for help, and being vulnerable enough to ask for help, which by the way is one of the most difficult things I think for any manager leader to do, is to admit that you're not good at something and go ask for help. It's probably half the reason why you develop toxic organizations, which by the way, Alan, you wrote a really good piece recently on toxic leadership. And I kind of feel like a toxic leader is one that doesn't ask for help very often.
Absolutely, absolutely right. And kind of the thrust of that article, where I draw at the very beginning that the caricature of, let's just say it, the assholic boss, the one that's just very clearly a bad leader and a bad person. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about good people with good intention who often behave in a way that is not good leadership.
Right.
With all the best intentions in the world, if your results are toxic, you've become an unintentional toxic leader.
Yeah.
And so being able, what it requires, or you said it earlier, humility. You got to be able to sit back and have a sensing of your organization. That's part of that if you can create it. If you can't sense your organization to see how they're doing, and how they're receiving the input you're giving them, you have to pay attention to that kind of stuff. If the results you achieve don't match your intent, the fault is yours, not theirs.
100%. Yeah. And so here, something too is like, I've certainly been guilty of falling into that category.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. We all have. We all have.
Like you make mistakes, and but the difficulty in it for people is when they don't take a moment to step back and go, okay, how did this go from where it was to where it is now? You could certainly create a list of blame, but that the entry on that list should be you. It's like, okay, you got to take accountability for what went wrong, and you got to say, okay, well, how did it get there? And the terrible leader ignores that and is too prideful to say, I messed up. But the good ones will go, okay, that did not go as expected, and what do I need to do to change it up so it doesn't happen again?
In my military career, I was privileged to command a Patriot battalion for 18th Airborne Corps. And 2 weeks after I took command, I had to deploy him back to the Middle East right after the first Gulf War. So Saddam Hussein was still chunking scuds at the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's camel farm and other things like airfields. And, I walked in as a commander that had to inherit a plan that I didn't build. And that was kind of a difficult situation for me. And my staff wasn't completely trained and competent. And so some of the things, the balls were getting dropped. And I sat back one day, and I still have the book sitting over here in my corner of Leadership Insights. And I sat down one day and I said, what is the anatomy of a failure? And to your point, it came down to 3 things. When things broke or the shit hit the fan, it was typically because either training, the people that had the task weren't properly trained, or they weren't properly resourced, like you need 6 people, not 2 people, or you needed funds or more equipment, or there was a discipline breakdown. And Ben, I got to tell you, I mean, the normal tendency for a new commander is, turn the mirror outward when the shit hits the fan and you say, why'd you guys screw that up? Well, that day I sat in and I turned that mirror back towards me. And I said, who's responsible for training, resourcing, and disciplining? The buck stops with the commander, with the leader. And from that day forward, when something breaks, instead of trying to look for the blame, I look at what role I played as a starting point. If you can admit that you screwed up, guess what your team's going to do?
Yeah. I hear what you're saying, Alan. I will say that one of the challenges, and certainly you had this in the military as well, but when you take on a team that you didn't build, boy, you really wish you could just bring in some boxes and start putting them on desks and giving people like 30 minutes and then redesign it the way that you feel it should be designed. Unfortunately, you can't really do that in a lot of businesses because does it happen? Sure. During mergers and acquisitions or big overhauls, those things do happen. But I mean, it's tough when you come into a role where you're taking on something you didn't create, and that's tough.
But you know what go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, how, because in the military, it's not like you can, what do? You can't fire someone. I guess you can reassign them.
Well, and so there's a real important teaching point and leadership lesson in this too, because in the years since then, I've often reflected on how I did it and how I created a good team and how we overcame those obstacles. And the first one we talked about before is this whole notion of accountability. You can take care of your people and still hold them accountable for everything they're supposed to do. And so that gets back to that discipline leg. If you don't hold them accountable for things they're supposed to do, guess what they're going to do? They're not going to do it, and things are going to break. And so I built a reputation. My driver nicknamed me the Hammer. Does that tell you anything? I'd prefer these days to be called the teacher, but back in the day, I was the Hammer, because if you were a discipline problem And this unit had issues with fraternization. It had race relations issues. It had sexual harassment issues. And I found all that out on the day I took command, which was 9 days before we deployed 600 some odd soldiers to the Middle East. So it wasn't a place where there was a lot of leeway for team building.
Yeah.
And so I started focusing on the incompetent leaders and holding them accountable. Now, here's the deal that I've learned in the 20 some odd years or 30 years since then. I created a lot of collateral damage that was probably unnecessary. I ruined a few kids' careers, officers primarily that are privileged to lead by virtue of having a college degree, a diploma. That doesn't make them good leaders. And so if they were shit leaders and didn't respond and didn't have the basic standards, you don't exactly fire them, but you convince them that their career's over and it's to their advantage to not stay in the Army after their commitment is up. And that's what I did. Now, today, differently, I was a screamer back in the day, and I was raised by some screamers like that. I wouldn't do that anymore. I used a lot of profanity, did a lot of yelling and screaming when the shit hit the fan, and it's just not necessary. And now I would do a lot more one-on-one. I would hold my temper in those public settings, and I would discipline the officer or the NCO offline. And so those were some of the mistakes that I've learned over the years to accept responsibility for and move out and try to do better, man.
Yeah, it is one of those very challenging things to know what the temperament is. And I mean, I would say that if there is anything positive we say about the up and coming generation, and because I don't think a lot of times the older generation speaks positively about the up and coming leaders, is that they have really changed the landscape of how you engage people, how you address them, how you talk to them, how you build relationships with them. And as a person who came up under a generation of leadership who like you, Alan, like that's for people to get huffy in the workplace and like basically be like, what are you doing, you idiot? This isn't rocket science. Like that
was normal.
That was normal. And so like my generation, we're kind of like, yeah, well, isn't that just how it is? And the younger generation is like, what are you doing? That's not how you talk to people. Yeah. So it's good that we've moved in a way that is helping us communicate differently. I think it's certainly needed. But man, I tell you, there are times when I wish I could revert back to the old days.
Well, and I want to stress another point too. It's really important. Earlier, you talked about priorities with time management and all that kind of stuff. I brought every one of those soldiers back home, and I grew up under a leader that was my mentor, and he said, "You know what? Anybody can take soldiers." He was a Vietnam War veteran, just an incredible leader, and he said, anybody can take soldiers into combat. It takes a real leader to bring them all back alive to their families. And I took that to heart, and I had 2 weeks to get my unit ready. And I was an asshole to some of them, but you know what? I brought them all back to their loved ones, and I'm proud about that. So
as you should be. That is, if you didn't take the hard line, if you didn't kind of wake people up and point them in the right direction, that inattention to results could have hurt them.
Not could have. It was already biting them in the ass, and it would have gotten somebody hurt in a deployment where you don't get second chances at a lot of this stuff. You know, you're working in these very, very dangerous weapon systems in a dangerous area with a dangerous enemy who doesn't want you to be there. And so you got no room for error there. And if you're privileged to wear a uniform as an officer and lead other people, you better be competent. You better be technically competent, and you better know your craft. And if you don't know your craft, I'm going to do my best to teach you, but I'm going to kick you in the ass and see if you get the message right.
Yeah, that is well said. Well, I tell you, Alan, one of the things I love about doing these podcasts and this kind of check-ins each week with where we're at is we get this opportunity to kind of like all of these conversations they are all related to what we're doing. They're all related to Disc Media. And I say that because there is a wealth of insight and wisdom and knowledge from people. And what we want to do is bring all of that to people interested in these kind of topics. I've always felt I've learned the most from just sitting down and having a conversation with people. It's so much more valuable than a textbook. And I will say, as a professor, the one thing that really like is so hard for me, I want people to speak up in a class. I want them to ask questions. I want them to be like, "Hey, old man, what are you talking about? That's not like." But so many people like they keep it all in, or they think that their job is to just kind of sit there and listen and take it in. And I just encourage everybody, take part in the conversation, become a part of it. You're going to get so much more out of whatever you're doing if you just engage with who you're working with and what you're working on. And so, and I say that because for those out there who are coming across this podcast or checking out our website, if you at all have this like notion that you can't reach out, please reach out to us. We love. I was talking about Sam, and I'm going to volunteer my time on his. I love doing things like that. I love talking to people. I love meeting people. I love engaging with people. This is why we do all this. This is what makes it fun. This is, Alan, you've said it a number of times. This is all part of the legacy, and you're not going to leave much of a legacy if you don't engage.
Well, speaking of that, you have just given me my 10th enduring insight for this podcast. And as we are prone to do, and it's not just about legacy too, it's about a repository of knowledge and insight that's going to make this valuable 5 years from now. Okay, so here we go. Number one, preserve the story as it unfolds authentically. And that was from the insight about don't just talk about the stuff that goes well. Admit what goes wrong. People learn more, if not from the things that go wrong and how you handle it, than they do from what went right. Number two, time management. Every session we're going to talk about time management. Your comment again, you reinforce this, was set and keep your priorities. If you overinvest in things that are not part of your bread and butter, you're putting your bread and butter at risk. So having those boundaries is really important. Number three, you ask about how to respond to changing environment and working through situations that are out of your control largely. And I gave you some ideas in military experience. And here's the answer. Whether you're military, civilian, or nonprofit, or academia, use your staff and collaborate with other people. And above all, know and appreciate what you don't know. Don't be arrogant about what you do know. Figure out what you don't know, and then learn with how to think, finding those resources to fill in those information gaps. The smartest, best leaders and commanders that I ever served with were ones that had greater value for things they didn't know than for things they did know. Number four, and this is one we talked a little bit about last time, but it's about if you do business with us, we will work with you to grow your business. And so this is about reaching out to other people and saying, join this team, be part of the conversation, and realize that while you're not going to get paid initially for it, you will have advocacy, you'll have a sponsorship, you'll have someone that gives you a platform to work from. That may be more compensation than money. It certainly is to me. And the benefits that I've gained just from working with you and knowing that my work is being put out there on a platform, and then you generously built that into your website, and I deeply appreciate that. Okay, number five, results matter. You're talking about building trust here. You got every organization got stakeholders, and you got to tell them what's going on. You got to keep them in the loop. If you want to have trust, you got to have that communication to share with them, like you did, what the results were, and to share that on a routine basis. That feeds motivational intelligence. So people will be engaged if you engage them. Number six, it takes time to build an audience. It's not going to happen overnight. Pivot when you fail. Don't give up. You said build a strong community of thoughtful people that support your vision and mission. So you're not trying to win the world. You got a scope. You got a site, you know what you're working for, you know what your community is going to look like, and that's what you got to work toward if you want to start a business, a media business. Number 7, be honest and authentic. No fake it until you make it. If you want to be a thought leader, you gotta own it. And part of that is being smart about looking for and finding resources, credit them, and integrate them into your work. That is a very powerful insight. Okay, the number 8 was about this business about creating a high performing team. And you stress the word if you can create it. And that's worth a lot of reflection. What does it take to create a high performing team? I would tell you that you've mentioned several traits and characteristics. Some of them are in that article that you published about toxic leaders and the opposite of that. But the one thing that I would say to that point about if you want to build it, you have to find a way to inspire and motivate your people. If you can't inspire and motivate them, you know what? You can all the other things that you can have, and they're just not going to work. Number 9 was when things go bad, and they will, step back and say, how did this go bad? And turn the mirror at yourself first before you look at someone else. And then number 10, your final point is don't just be an observer. We don't want observers on this media. We want participants. Be a participant in the process, have a voice, and reach out to us. So that's 10 insights for today's hour.
That is awesome. Alan, I'm always flattered that you find insightful things that I'm saying. I just ramble. And the fact that you're able to pull out these nuggets of wisdom, I appreciate that. You make me look good.
You make me look good. And that's what teamwork's all about.
That's right.
It's better than making each other look bad. So if you keep talking about sports teams, we're both going to go down the drain.
especially because if anybody knows me, I am the worst sports fan. I know living here in the South, college sports is a religion, but I have not. I'm just not into it as much as a lot of people I've worked with are, which is fine. Look, I don't mind that you love it that much. I've got my focus elsewhere.
Where you spend your time, man. And I'm like you. I am like you, man. When I got free time, I'm just not one of those that's going to spend 6 hours on the golf course or 8 hours watching a football game on TV. You know.
Yeah. And by the way, I think it's great if you enjoy it and have at it, go for it. But what's funny, I'm in a fantasy football league with some colleagues of mine in the wine industry.
Not doing so well there.
Well, I told everybody coming out of the gate, I said, I'm going to use AI to do my picks each week. So that's the approach I'm taking. So everybody knows I am not a big football fan. And because we deal with Italian wine and a lot of people I deal with are Italians, I sent a reply to everybody today when they were like, hey, get your picks in order because the season's about to kick off. And I'm like, I can't find Massey anywhere here. And if anybody is not a sports fan, so Massey plays soccer or what is considered football everywhere else in the world, and American football, you would not find Massey. So anyway, Alan, thank you so much for joining. We're going to grow this podcast. We're going to grow the Daily Pitch. We are on our way, but I'm always so thankful of your help and your comments and your contributions and everything that you're doing to help out. So thank you, my friend, for joining and taking the time to share some of your wisdom each week.
And thank you for giving me a platform for my work and to share story, because that's how we create legacy.
Absolutely. Well, folks, thanks for checking us out once again. Until next time, we'll see you later. Adios.